everybody. I am taking on my role again as an MC. I'm super excited to have a lovely lady here with me on stage. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
So, what are we gonna talk about today? Before I give the word to the moderator.
I guess about social responsibility and companies how they take care of this. So I guess.
That's right. VCs, their impact on portfolio companies and society. I'm super excited to give the word to Michael, general partner in Flashpoint VC. Michael, the word is yours. You can introduce the panel and enjoy the conversation. Have fun.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Salentai. I'm a general partner at Flashpoint. And today we're going to talk about sort of VC impact on society and sort of the social responsibility role that VCs should undertake. But also we will sort of talk about how portfolio companies take part in this piece of the puzzle. Before we start our conversation, I would like to pass the word around so that everyone can introduce themselves. Let's maybe start with our ladies. I'm passing the word to Lisa first.
Hi everyone, I'm super glad to be here. I'm Lisa. I'm part of the investment team at Unica Ventures, which is a CVC based in Vienna, Austria. We're a Series A investor. We're investing in InsurTech, FinTech, and digital health. So social responsibility is a core topic when we look at investments, and I'm happy to share more insights soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Going over to Monica.
Hi, I'm Monica. I'm COO in Telemedi. We do teleconsultations and generally hybrid health. So I will tell you a little bit more later when we start to talk in our panel, and we'll be happy to join this panel.
Excellent. Haim, over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Great to be with all of you. I'm Haim Zaltzman. I head the finance practice for Latham & Watkins in the San Francisco Bay Area, our Silicon Valley and San Francisco offices. I've been involved in many ESG-related investments, from Impossible Foods to Aspiration to Beyond Meat and others. And I'm really looking forward to discussing our topic today on ESG and social responsibility.
Excellent. Thank you. So, we are at Flashpoint ourselves sort of a multi-stage investor supporting companies at various stages of their development. And I mean, I can say that, in the 10 years that I've been working at Flashpoint since the very first day, I think the worldview on sort of ESG has been changing a lot. It's definitely more sort of in the mainstream discussion now than it was 10 years ago when we started. So let me maybe start with a controversial question to make our discussion sort of more sexy. Should VCs even care about ESG? Why is ESG important? And to those of you who don't know, ESG stands for basically environment, social, and corporate governance. So what do you guys think? Should VCs, focus on their returns and just do what they do, and ESG should be a byproduct of their work? Or should they be more conscious about thinking, how they impact the world? Haim, do you want to maybe start?
Sure, I'll start. I love jumping in after you say that you want something sexy. That's usually my cue to jump right in there. I appreciate that, Michael. Look, there are two responses that are more traditional, and then I'll toss in a more a difficult response. We'd love to hear what Monica and Lisa think about that. The traditional response is, one, ESG is financially attractive. I mentioned a few of the companies that have invested in ESG that have done really well in the space, right? From the alternative protein companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat to fintechs that are focused on ESGs like Aspiration and other similar companies. Lots of other food techs from vertical farming like Bauer farming, things of that sort. So there is a attractive return for venture capitalists and others in the space. The other one is probably the more controversial one, and one thing that I would love to hear the panel on is, VC should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. You not only want to be at the cutting edge of technology for return purposes. You want to be at the cutting edge of society and ahead of the historical moment of where we're going. And with venture capital, it's oftentimes easier to do that in the emerging companies world, where you're doing smaller investments than trying to make that change. Some would say at the huge corporate, huge supply chain world where it's more difficult to make incremental changes or really change the system. So the view is that we should be, because it's financially attractive. And then the more controversial response to you is you should be because it's the right thing to do, and you should take this first step towards a world moment that and hope is coming historically, which is the type of things that ESG is focused on. It's focused on environmental issues, it's focused on social justice, it's focused on governance, and venture capitalists and the companies that they invest in, and the ecosystem that works with them, including humble lawyers like myself, should be supporting that move rather than just waiting for it to happen. But I would love to hear what Monica and Lisa think of that, because it's controversial in many areas that we shouldn't, the venture capital emerging companies world should not be trying to lead society to any particular space. It should be focused on its investment. But I don't think that's right. I think not only is the investment can be lucrative, but it could also it's the right thing to do, and the right thing to do is to make a step towards the right historical moment, which is being leaders in environmental, social justice, and governance practices that will bring to equity and equality.
Yeah, happy to continue here. I think we're in an incredible privileged position to be able to invest funds on behalf of our investors. So we have the ability to choose which companies to finance. So I think we have the ability to also select according to the criteria that matters too much more to us. So ESG is definitely something that we can consciously select for, and we can also push companies to become more aware and to take more actions towards this.
I won't say anything from the VC side, but on the company side, I would say there is no one who shouldn't take care of this, and I would say we generally need to take care of and be socially responsible. So I guess VCs and also companies that are trying to build businesses and trying to find VCs need to take care of those topics, and we need to go in this direction, not to make it worse.
I think the controversy is that, traditionally market economy has been free, right? And as Adam Smith said, we need to sort of trust the sort of invisible hand of profits and returns that will help sort of the subjects, in our case, the VC companies and the portfolio companies as well, sort of to do the right thing, right? But unfortunately, VCs are limited by time. I mean, usually our funds are dated, right? We get our funds for 10 years. And I believe that the problem with ESG versus the VC world is that the investment horizon is often very, very different, right? In the ESG world, if you really want to enact change, it might take a long, long time, especially if you want to enact this change sort of profitably. So how do you think sort of this difference in VCs being inherently short-term minded, is it a problem for ESG? Maybe let's start with Lisa, since you're also on the VC side. Do you see this problem when you invest, that you think about ESG and you realize that it's just out of your timeline?
Not necessarily. So I think that that startups can make little steps right at the beginning to ensure that they are more ESG compliant, without necessarily without losing the long-term goal, also making just short-term steps to be, for example, carbon neutral, or just ensuring that suppliers also, for example, pay workers more than a living wage, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, if I could jump in there as well, I think it's actually a unique situation right now, where the economic landscape has changed. I mean, traditionally, I think you're probably right in that it took a long time. You had to develop supply chains for ESG. The environmental stuff was slower. The energy. Two things have changed. One, the ability to do stuff generally on speedier timelines, both in the material sciences and the supply chain, as well as in obviously investment and moving money has changed significantly. So things move faster to allow you to effectuate and get a return faster in ESG related areas. But the second point that really has changed is been more structural. We now are at the cusp where a lot of the ESG related industries that have taken forever to form and get to what I call a critical juncture that we're seeing from clients is there. So the examples are obviously the electrification of transport, the alternative protein industries that have amazing environmental impacts, all the e-commerce related deliveries, things of that sort that obviously have some ESG negative impacts to them as well. But the infrastructure of moving things, doing that stuff, a lot of those companies have already paved the way so that new investments can really easily channel through already existing platforms. And as a lawyer, we're trying to obviously duplicate those structures when we do new investments, making sure companies are using the same stuff to speed up all of that transactional blockage that you would more typically have. So in many ways, we see it as it just doesn't take as long to invest and get a return as it used to. It still takes a while, but it's longer. And the biggest issue, the question, kind of to throw back your Adam Smith line or metaphor back, the invisible hand always needed a slapping. Is what we always hear. And one of the biggest areas where the VC investing world, emerging companies world, needs to focus on, which is probably why you have this old lawyer on the call with all of you investors and others, is that you got to remember the regulatory platform and how you fit into regulatory rule of law, but the regulatory regimes, and the regimes are getting more nimble and adjusting. Probably the best example, aside from the electrification and things of that sort, that right now is getting a lot of attention is the crypto world and crypto investing. Obviously, that has less to do with the ESG directly, although some of the platforms are impacted. But the crypto companies, the exchanges that are doing better and are successful are the ones that are ready for regulatory fiat, that are ready to deal with regulators, and the ESG world is now ready to do that as well. Has been for a while, and that regulatory platform is now more set in many key jurisdictions around the world to take on ESG type investments.
To continue maybe your thought a little bit, to my mind, the way sort of to slap the invisible hand is through sort of the IFI investors, right? Sort of the international financial institutions, the government funds. I mean, their objective is to act as essentially as a fund of fund. So basically give money to the VCs. And I think it should be their job to basically favor VCs who care about ESG, right? And that way they can essentially build in a positive signal into the system, right? We give more money to VCs who sort of care about ESG. They get to make money, and then they get to raise even more money sort of if they become successful. I think, to my mind, it's quite hard to pass it on to the VCs. And maybe following on a little bit about what sort of Lisa spoke, it's very hard. I haven't, at least myself, seen any VCs who think about the carbon footprint of their investments. It's not sort of, it's not on the agenda. It's not in the scoring system. It's not in the evaluation matrix, right? And I think it's a problem. I think we need to think more about our footprint. But unless our investors a little bit push us there, it's hard to do it. And I would love to hear, Monica, if you guys at the portfolio company level, you do think about about carbon footprint in any way, because it's well known that creating a lot of tech workplaces does have a carbon footprint. It's not sort of a zero-sum game.
I would say, as you mentioned, that if we have that if we know that someone takes care of this, then on the other side, companies, startups that are looking for VCs are starting to take care of all of this also. Because if we are more, as you said, sexy because of this side being socially responsible to VCs, then we start to take care of this. So it's closed circle. We need to all try to start thinking about this, and then this is how it goes. Because right now, I also didn't hear about taking care of the footprint, and I guess we are also not thinking about this. We are more thinking about how to be socially responsible in our business, in healthcare, how to help people in this sense, how to make it more affordable for all the people, but not all aspects of being more green.
Yeah, let's move on maybe to social responsibility. It's a good moment. And Monica, I'm really impressed with what you guys did, especially sort of in COVID times. I think the type of service that you provided has been essential in order for people to have still access to medicine when, basically physical access to medical facilities was very, very limited. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll follow up with the issues that flow from this.
Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, especially in Poland, where we were facing this highest COVID times, let's call it, almost getting to the doctor stationarily was almost not possible. So for a lot of people, we were the only source of getting in touch with their doctors, with prolonging their prescriptions, with being cured all the time. Because it's not like when we are facing the COVID, there are no other diseases, and people stop to have their chronic diseases. So we still wanted to help those people. We still wanted doctors to have the direct contact with their patients. And this is what happened. Almost 90% of the consultations that were done with our partners, with the companies that we work between March and June last year, were done through telemedicine. So you can imagine what would happen if we didn't have this solution, if still people will be thinking then that it's not working, that we shouldn't believe in this solution. And this is what was going on 4 or 5 years ago, when we were starting to learn the market, that we can use it, that there are specialties, there are doctors, that are diseases that we can treat through telemedicine. And I guess people believed in this. Of course, right now it decreased, because we are trying to get back to normal. So we are coming back to 40-50% of consultations that can be done through teleconsultations. But we are always going backwards. So we started through normal teleconsultations. And right now we are looking for other ways to help people to make this new patient journey for eHealth. So trying also to prevent the diseases, making health planners, health systems to know before you get ill, and redirect you directly to the specialties that you need, not to build again the same system, the same queues that we had before COVID, because it's not the way we need to be. We need to help somehow and change this, not to say, okay, COVID is over and we can come back to what we had before, because it won't come back to normal as it was before.
Agreed. I think the VCs that invested in you guys can feel very lucky that, definitely they contributed to resolving society's issues. But I'm sure that, many people have seen the film Social Dilemma on Netflix. And, oftentimes VCs support companies that are responsible for illnesses and sort of problems for the youth, right? So I think the ethics question, the question of sort of ethical technologies, is very, very important. And Lisa, I'd love to hear how you guys look at this and what you personally think about this subject.
Yeah, I think it's very important to address this. We've seen that companies focusing on growth were also associated with mental health problems, distributing misinformation, or work-related issues. So I think that's definitely something we focus on. Also, when we're looking at startups, we really try to understand what's their ESG relation, what it's their focus, which issues are they tackling, and we want to build a portfolio that's more sustainable and also in the long term. And that is, as for example, Telemedico and Monica are doing, they're really tackling issues for societies. They're basically giving access to medical care to people who would not have the possibility to just physically see a doctor, but also, for example, for doctors which cannot work from home as we do. They have the possibility to consult with patients from the comfort of their home. So I think companies like Telemedicus have very important issues also for our society.
Agreed. Chaim, I mean, you're in the Valley, and I expect you guys are at the forefront of sort of legal regulatory changes related to ethics, right? So how do you see this evolving? Do you think, we need to think about the ethics of tech investing?
Um, I see it evolving not smoothly because it is fairly controversial, probably more so here in the United States, following up on some of the major social justice upheavals and movements that we've had the last 2 years. The Black Lives Matter movement, things that came out of that one. So we do have boards. Look, here's what I will tell you. Definitely folks have moved towards some concrete measures. So obviously, board diversity to address some social inequities has been very clear, and that's something that the venture capital world can definitely lead on. Is making sure boards are more diverse, both gender and in terms of minority representation. That's been happening across the board from our experience, even without some of the legal changes that California and other places have instituted. That we've just seen much more board diversity, much more C-suite diversity. I know the numbers are not there yet, and they're catching up, but we have seen a huge movement on that front. I will tell you, after that, it gets more controversial, and we are seeing some, and we're involved in some very interesting research into some of the things that can be done at the quote unquote legal level. Like, for example, just to throw it out there, Airbnb, which happens to be a Latham client, has no representation here on this call, has an anti-discrimination agreement that it makes all of its users, all of its hosts, as they call them, sign that they won't discriminate against anyone based on gender, ethnicity, etc. And there's an article on this, but it's something close to 2 million, somewhere between 1 and 2 million. I think it was 1.7 million or so. Individuals across the world would not sign that agreement, and Airbnb would not let them use its platform. So things of that nature, and whether or not the venture capital community and the companies it support can push contract related representations, use those type of things, making folks represent that they do not support organizations that espouse or support hate crimes, things of that sort. That is more controversial, but we are starting to see more and more folks look into that, address it, whether or not they want to have that kind of level in their contracts. It's what we call the do no evil contract provisions, and we're seeing more and more interest in that from companies and venture capitalists. And hey, can we do this? What if we put this, like Airbnb has an anti-discrimination clause in our contracts, and you can obviously take that across the board. I see that area, Michael, being super interesting and extremely controversial for many areas because it does touch on many of the things that the VC community cares about or pretends to care about, which is freedom to negotiate, freedom to contract, freedom of market, being able to uproot industries now. But this is a way contractually to also make sure that the money that you're investing, or try to make sure that the money that folks are investing is not used for evil. It's you're not investing in things, in people who support hate groups or hate crimes that you may not be supportive of. So we're seeing more and more interest on that level, and I would love to hear. We haven't seen this take off as a movement yet, but there is a lot of coming out of the United States following Black Lives Matter and other developments that have occurred, that it wants to use the legal contracting, the power of the contract, and the leverage that venture capitalists and companies have in the market to try to, basically get some of these views and contractual elements into very regular commercial contracts. To me, that is going to be a super interesting area. I'd love to hear what if folks, if you're seeing that across the pond as well. My sense is there isn't anything of that sort, but it'll be super interesting whether you're seeing anything like that.
Not yet. I think we're playing catch up in Europe in this department. I mean, I think what you're talking about is to a degree sort of self-regulation of the industry, right? Sort of the leading tech companies and sort of the leading VCs of the world trying to self-regulate themselves a little bit ahead of sort of the governments regulating them, because I think everyone understands that governments will start regulating this stuff, right? And it's basically about how the industry engages in conversation with the government and with the regulators about, what this regulation should be. And I guess self-regulation is a form of protecting yourself from potential sort of regulatory negative changes coming. I mean, I can tell you that definitely at our end, we do try to evaluate the regulatory framework around an industry. And very often we see that the changes in the regulatory framework are sort of, ESG and ethics driven, right? So basically the governments are trying to sort of shift the responsibility a little bit towards the investors. And especially we see this, by the way, on sort of the corporate governance and the KYC front. I mean, think about how easy it was to move money 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Right now you have FATCA, you have CRS. Essentially, the administrators and the banking authorities, the banks, now have to self-regulate and have to make sure, have to prove the innocence of the investors, which was not the case 10 years ago. And this definitely has introduced added costs into the system. Is it for the benefit of the world? For sure. But, is it good for business? Probably not. So I think this is where really we need to sort of find the balance, and it's very hard to find this balance. I mean, I guess Lisa, to a degree, being in Unica, which is more of a captive venture operation within Unica, right, is more lucky because she has sort of one investor, and it's very clear, where the funds are coming from. But I think, even for you guys, potentially sort of seeing more regulation is troublesome at times.
I mean, what we've seen in our investment process, that still KYC is a very important topic. So especially when we invest with other VCs or with other individuals, also we always have to check the KYC requirements. So I think just having a single LP doesn't make it easier for us.
Understood. So look, I think this is a huge problem of finding the balance, right? We take on all of these responsibilities, right? Corporate governance responsibilities, social responsibilities, ethics responsibilities, but it all comes with a cost. So how do we find this balance of still being able to generate a good return, but also being able to do all of this other stuff that is now sort of required by society for us to be, you know, the good guys. I think it's a hard question, and it's a it's a very fine balance to strike. And I think it's similar to portfolio companies. I mean, I guess, Monica, for you guys, you receive the investment, you want to spend it in a nice way, right? Develop your company, but at the same time, you have to sort of think, okay, what we need to do in order to be seen as the good guys. And I mean, in your case, you maybe are lucky that your main activity is very, you know, socially positive. But for other portfolio companies where maybe it's less clear, you know, this can be a real problem.
Yeah, I would say, as you mentioned at the beginning, this social dilemma will always be the dilemma, because there are businesses, we are business, we want to make money and we want to earn more and more, as it's obvious. But on the other side, we want to do something good. We want to change what we have right now, and we want to go further. And without those changes, without some regulatory changes, we won't be able to do this, as you mentioned, because everyone will skip this part, because it's not. It does not give very obvious money, and we want to spend it as we want, and it's not always the easiest choice to do. However, I would say there always needs to be some internal reflection that we need to go in this direction, and think what will happen in few years, not only right now, not only that we want to grow with the business, but how we will impact our world and our society in few years. So I guess we are at this part, and we are thinking about elder people, because, for example, to mention, about 2% of our clients right now are over 60 years old, but over 50, what is quite a number. We have 20% of people. So in few years, they will get into this group of people over 60 years old, and they will be used to using telemedicine. So we are growing and growing in this number of in this group of people, and that's why we are trying to focus more also on elderly people, trying to make programs for those, trying to build health plans for them, not to get ill so fast, and not to spend 60% of their time after 60 in the medical centers, because this is what happens right now. If we don't take care about them, the only person they will talk to in few years, it will be a doctor or a psychologist, and from the maybe they like to do this, but I wouldn't say it's our target to do so. We are trying to prevent it. We are trying to make more actions towards also elder people, trying to make it more affordable, giving some equipment to our patients, like e-stethoscope, to treat them inside their home, not to build the queues inside the medical centers, etc., etc. So we could talk more and more about this. Yeah.
I think the last question that I have, and it's for all of you guys, and I think it's a good note to finish our discussion. You know, if we had this panel again, and what would change? What would be the main change that you would like to see sort of to happen in these 5 years in this sort of topic? Lisa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think my wish would be that ESG would be an integral part of the investment decision. So really, when sourcing companies and making the decision to invest or not, that we would really seriously consider their ESG impact. And also, as a VC, what we could add to our portfolio companies, how we could help them become better in these different buckets. Yeah.
I would say what I would like to see is that we are not losing when we care about what will happen next, that we are not losing the business, we are not the only ones that take care of this, and that all the companies that would like to have, for example, investment or like to be global companies need to take care and think about our results, our impact on our world in 10, 15 years. And it's obvious. We don't need to think if it's good way or not good way. It's just how we act.
Yeah, and on my end, it's pretty straightforward. Other than losing Michael, which I think he's got a technical glitch occurring right now. It looks like he's coming back on. There he is. The two things that I hope in 5 years. One is Michael. I hope you and I still have hair, which would be very nice. It's a good 5 year goal. But the other one really is that we don't talk about this anymore. And the reason we don't talk about it anymore, just like we just assume that the KYC and the anti-racketeering and all the stuff on the legal platform is already built into the contract, that we just deal with it its normal course. I'm hopeful that in 5 years or maybe 10 years, that ESG and social responsibility related concepts are so normal course that we have to, in every type of contract that we do legally in the venture capital community, are already addressing it. No, it's a must that we will spend money, that all the investments are done in an ESG compliant, socially responsible way, and that we talk about it less because it's just a normal part of our legal framework.
I think that would be great, although I think it's very unlikely. To me, the most important thing is that E gets blown up, because I think we have a real problem with the E, and unfortunately, as VCs, we're furthest away from impacting the E, but we have to, because unless we do, we might still have hair, but we might have bigger problems ahead of us. So let's hope that it doesn't happen. Thank you all for a great discussion. I hope it was sexy enough for our crowd, and hopefully everyone will start thinking more about these problems and try to contribute in their own little way. Because if we all do contribute even a little bit, then the planet and life on Earth becomes better. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.